The Westfield Elite Horse Auction was the event of the season in Thornbury County. Polished boots clicked against marble floors, champagne flutes clinked, and the air smelled of expensive perfume and new leather. Among the tailored suits and designer dresses stood Eleanor Thatcher, dressed in faded jeans, muddy work boots, and a simple flannel shirt that had seen better days. "Is she lost?" whispered Priscilla Montgomery, the auction house owner's daughter, loud enough for nearby attendees to hear. "The farmer's market is downtown, honey." Laughter rippled through the gathering. Eleanor's cheeks flushed, but her gaze remained steady on the magnificent Andalusian stallion being led around the display ring. Her calloused fingers clutched a bidding paddle that looked out of place in her weathered hands. "Someone should tell her the starting bid for that horse is more than she'll make in a decade," sneered Victor Lancaster, heir to Lancaster Oil. "Her entire farm probably isn't worth half what these animals sell for." Eleanor pretended not to hear as she studied the horse's gait with expert eyes. At 28, she'd spent her life working the struggling 50 acres her parents had left her when they died. What these people didn't know was that beneath her unassuming appearance lay a lifetime of knowledge about horses, knowledge that came from necessity rather than leisure. The auctioneer's voice boomed through the hall. "Next up, lot number 37, Midnight Commander, a 5-year-old Frisian stallion. Impeccable bloodlines, trained in dressage with exceptional potential. We'll start the bidding at $50,000. A murmur of appreciation swept through the crowd as the magnificent black horse entered the ring, its mane flowing like silk, muscles rippling beneath a coat that gleamed under the spotlights. Eleanor felt her heart race. This was the horse she'd come for. "50,000 to the gentleman in the gray suit," called the auctioneer. "Do I hear 60? 60,000, came another voice. The bidding climbed rapidly as Eleanor watched, her expression carefully neutral despite the butterflies in her stomach. The price soared past 100,000, then 150,000. 175,000 to Mrs. Rothschild, announced the auctioneer. Going once, Eleanor raised her paddle. 200,000. The room fell silent before erupting into poorly concealed laughter and whispers. "Does she think this is a joke? Security should remove her." The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, this is a serious auction. The bid is for $200,000. "I understand," Eleanor replied, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. Victor Lancaster stepped forward, his expensive cologne filling the space between them. "Listen, farm girl, why don't you go home before you embarrass yourself further? This isn't a place for people like you." Eleanor met his gaze without flinching. "And what kind of people is that, Mr. Lancaster?" "People who can't afford to be here," he said with a dismissive flick of his hand. "That horse costs more than you'll see in a lifetime." The auctioneer awkwardly intervened. 200,000 from the lady in flannel. "Do I hear 225? The crowd watched with amusement, waiting for Eleanor to be outbid. But something in her quiet confidence made Victor Lancaster pause. He studied her more carefully, the straight posture, the keen eyes that evaluated the horse with undeniable expertise. For the first time, he felt a flicker of uncertainty about the seemingly simple farm girl, who stood her ground in a world that wasn't meant for her. 225, called Victor, raising his paddle with a smug smile toward Eleanor. The auctioneer nodded. 225 to Mr. Lancaster. Do I hear 250? Without hesitation, Eleanor raised her paddle again. 250,000. The whispers grew louder. Priscilla Montgomery sidled up to her father. "Daddy, someone needs to stop this farce. She can't possibly have that kind of money." Richard Montgomery, owner of the auction house, frowned. "Actually, Priscilla, all bidders are pre-qualified. If she's holding a paddle, she's been cleared by our financial department." "That's impossible?" Priscilla hissed. The bidding continued with growing tension. Victor Lancaster's face reddened as he continued raising the stakes, only to have Eleanor calmly counter each time. When the bid reached $350,000, many in the audience had stopped laughing and started watching with genuine curiosity. 375,000, Victor announced, a bead of sweat forming on his brow. Eleanor took a deep breath. 400,000. Victor hesitated, then slowly lowered his paddle. The auctioneer's gavel struck with finality. "Sold. To the lady in flannel for $400,000. As Eleanor made her way to the processing office, whispers followed her. No one approached except for a silver-haired man in an impeccably tailored suit who studied her with intelligent eyes. "Miss Thatcher, isn't it?" he asked, extending his hand. "I'm James Harrington." Eleanor's expression remained neutral as she shook his hand. "Mr. Harrington." That was quite a purchase. Midnight Commander is exceptional, but I wonder what He paused, searching for a diplomatic word. Someone with your background plans to do with such a horse. I have my reasons, Eleanor replied simply. Inside the processing office, the clerk eyed her threadbare clothes dubiously. We'll need payment verification before the horse can be released. Of course. Eleanor reached into her worn leather satchel and handed over a certified bank check. The clerk's eyes widened as she processed the payment. Everything appears to be in order, Miss Thatcher. Would you like transportation arranged for your new purchase? I have my own trailer, thank you. As Eleanor exited the office, she found a small crowd had gathered, including Victor Lancaster and the Montgomerys. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to suspicion. I don't know what game you're playing, Victor said, but there's no way a dirt farmer has $400,000 to spend on a horse. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. Perhaps you should reconsider your assumptions about dirt farmers, Mr. Lancaster. James Harrington watched the exchange with interest. I believe there's more to Miss Thatcher than meets the eye. I've been following your work with injured rescue horses, haven't I? Your rehabilitation techniques are quite innovative. Eleanor's face softened slightly. You're well informed, Mr. Harrington. I make it my business to know exceptional talent when I see it, he replied, though I admit I didn't expect to find you bidding on one of the most expensive horses at the auction. Life is full of surprises, Eleanor said, turning to leave. As she walked away, James Harrington turned to the bewildered crowd. That dirt farmer, as you call her, has quietly revolutionized equine rehabilitation techniques. Her methods have saved horses that most veterinarians would have euthanized. He glanced at Victor Lancaster, and if I'm not mistaken, she just outbid one of the wealthiest men in the county. The following morning, news of Eleanor's unexpected purchase spread through Thornbury County like wildfire. At her modest farmhouse, Eleanor rose before dawn as usual, pulling on work clothes and heading out to tend to her animals. The property, known as Willow Creek Farm, had seen better days. The barn needed painting, the fences required repair, and the farmhouse itself was humble but clean. What visitors couldn't see was the state-of-the-art rehabilitation facility hidden behind the weathered barn. There, in a building constructed with every penny Eleanor had saved over the years, lay her life's work, a sanctuary where injured horses regained their strength through her innovative techniques. As she finished her morning chores, a black luxury SUV rolled up the dirt driveway. The vehicle looked comically out of place against the backdrop of the rural farm. Eleanor wiped her hands on her jeans as Priscilla Montgomery stepped out, designer boots immediately collecting dust. I had to see for myself, Priscilla said without greeting, what someone like you plans to do with a champion Frisian. Eleanor gestured toward the barn. He'll arrive this afternoon. Would you like to see where he'll be staying? Curiosity overcoming her disdain, Priscilla followed Eleanor to the barn. She expected filth and squalor, but instead found meticulously cleaned stalls, fresh bedding, and evidence of expert care. This is surprisingly adequate, Priscilla admitted reluctantly. But it doesn't explain how you could afford him. Eleanor led her through a door at the back of the barn. Priscilla gasped as they entered a sophisticated equine rehabilitation center. Exercise pools, specialized treadmills, monitoring equipment, all cutting-edge technology housed in an immaculate facility. What is this place? Priscilla asked, her haughty demeanor temporarily forgotten. This is what I do, Eleanor replied simply. I rehabilitate horses that others have given up on. But this equipment must cost millions, and you live like. Priscilla gestured vaguely toward the modest farmhouse. Like someone who puts horses before luxury? Eleanor finished her. Yes. Before Priscilla could respond, another vehicle approached, a pickup truck pulling a horse trailer. James Harrington emerged from the passenger side. Miss Thatcher, he called, I hope you don't mind my presumption, but I arranged transport for Midnight Commander myself. I was curious to see your operation firsthand. Eleanor nodded in greeting. Not at all, Mr. Harrington. As the magnificent Frisian was carefully unloaded, even Priscilla had to admire the animal's beauty. The horse moved with grace despite a slight favoring of his right hind leg, something only the most experienced eye would notice. You saw it too, James said quietly to Eleanor. The minor lameness that the sellers were concealing. It was why I wanted him, Eleanor confirmed. They were masking it with anti-inflammatories during showings. In another month, the damage would have been permanent. Priscilla looked between them in confusion. What are you talking about? That horse is worth a fortune. And would have been worthless in 6 months, Eleanor explained. His racing and competition days are numbered unless that developing tendon issue is addressed properly. You spent $400,000 on a defective horse? Priscilla asked incredulously. James Harrington chuckled. Miss Thatcher didn't spend that money on a defective horse. She invested it in what she does best, saving extraordinary animals that others would discard. But why not just buy a healthy horse? Priscilla pressed. Eleanor led Midnight Commander to a specially prepared stall. Because this one needed me, and because after I heal him, his bloodline will be invaluable to my breeding program. As she spoke, her phone rang. Eleanor glanced at it and excused herself to take the call, leaving Priscilla and James Harrington standing in the spotless aisle of the rehabilitation center. She's more than she appears, isn't she? Priscilla murmured, watching Eleanor speak professionally into the phone, her entire demeanor shifting from humble farmer to confident specialist. Miss Montgomery, James replied, you have no idea who you've been mocking all these years. The following week brought unexpected visitors to Willow Creek Farm. Eleanor was working with Midnight Commander in the round pen, carefully assessing his gait, when 3 luxury vehicles pulled into the driveway. She recognized Victor Lancaster's Range Rover immediately, accompanied by Richard Montgomery's Mercedes and a third car she didn't recognize. Wiping her brow, Eleanor secured the Frisian and walked over to greet her uninvited guests. Victor and Richard emerged, along with a slender woman in her 60s, elegantly dressed with an air of old money. Miss Thatcher, Richard Montgomery began formally, forgive the intrusion, but Lady Winthrop specifically requested to meet you during her visit from England. Eleanor nodded politely. Welcome to Willow Creek Farm. Lady Winthrop extended a gloved hand. I've heard fascinating things about your work, Miss Thatcher. When Richard mentioned your purchase of Midnight Commander, I simply had to see for myself. Victor Lancaster looked uncomfortable. Lady Winthrop is considering substantial investments in our county's equestrian facilities. And I never invest blindly, the older woman added with a shrewd smile. I understand you rehabilitate injured horses with remarkable success. I do what I can, Eleanor replied modestly. Would you like a tour? As Eleanor guided them through her facility, Lady Winthrop asked precise, knowledgeable questions that revealed her extensive equestrian background. Victor and Richard exchanged glances as Eleanor answered each inquiry with expertise that surprised them both. This hydrotherapy system is your own design? Lady Winthrop asked, examining the underwater treadmill where a chestnut mare was exercising. Yes, Eleanor confirmed. Traditional methods weren't effective enough for certain injuries, so I developed alternatives. Remarkable, Lady Winthrop murmured. And you've documented your success rates? 87% full recovery in cases where euthanasia was the recommended course of action, Eleanor stated. The research is being published next month in the International Equine Veterinary Journal. Victor cleared his throat. I had no idea your hobby was so scientific. Eleanor's eyes flashed. It's not a hobby, Mr. Lancaster. It's my life's work. As they approached Midnight Commander's stall, Lady Winthrop's eyes widened in recognition. This was Duchess of Kent's champion, wasn't it? The one with the mysterious lameness that appeared after his last race. Eleanor nodded. His tendon damage was subtle but worsening. Another month of racing would have ended his career permanently. And you identified this at the auction? Lady Winthrop asked. I've been tracking his condition through videos of his recent performances, Eleanor explained. When I heard he was being sold, I knew I had to intervene. Lady Winthrop studied Eleanor with new respect. You're not at all what they described, Miss Thatcher. And what was that? Eleanor asked quietly. Richard Montgomery had the decency to look embarrassed. There may have been some misconceptions about your background and expertise. I see. Eleanor's voice remained neutral. After completing the tour, they gathered in Eleanor's modest office. Lady Winthrop came directly to the point. I'd like to discuss a potential partnership, Miss Thatcher. Your rehabilitation techniques could revolutionize equine care across Europe. Victor Lancaster leaned forward. Lady Winthrop has connections to royal stables throughout Europe. This could be extremely lucrative. Eleanor considered them thoughtfully. I appreciate the interest, but my techniques aren't proprietary secrets. I've published most of my findings already, available to anyone who wants to help horses recover. But not everyone has your touch, Lady Winthrop pressed. I'm proposing something more significant, a chain of rehabilitation centers based on your methods, with you as the directing force. That would take me away from direct care, Eleanor replied. I'm not interested in becoming an administrator. Victor looked incredulous. Do you have any idea how much money you're turning down? Eleanor's gaze was steady. I didn't develop these techniques to get rich, Mr. Lancaster. I did it because every horse deserves a chance to heal. As their guest departed, Lady Winthrop lingered. Your parents would be proud, Eleanor. Eleanor froze. You to my parents? Margaret and William Thatcher were dear friends many years ago. Lady Winthrop said gently. Before they chose this simple life. I've been following your career from afar for some time. The Thornbury County Fair and Horse Exhibition was in full swing by mid-June. Eleanor typically avoided such events, preferring the solitude of her farm, but this year was different. Midnight Commander had made a remarkable recovery under her care, and she had entered him in the exhibition, not to compete, but to demonstrate the success of her rehabilitation program. The fairgrounds bustled with activity as Eleanor led the magnificent Frisian toward the demonstration area. People stopped to admire the horse, many recognizing him from his racing days. Whispers followed them. Isn't that the Thatcher woman? The one who outbid Victor Lancaster? I heard she turned down a partnership with Lady Winthrop. The gossip mill had been working overtime since the auction. Eleanor's quiet life had been thrust into the spotlight, a position she found deeply uncomfortable. Still, she had a purpose today, to show what was possible when horses were given proper care after injury. As she prepared Midnight Commander for their demonstration, a familiar voice called out. Miss Thatcher. James Harrington approached, accompanied by a group of distinguished-looking individuals. May I introduce the board of directors from the International Equine Rehabilitation Foundation? They'd come specifically to see your work. Eleanor shook hands politely, though her stomach tightened with anxiety. She had never sought attention for her methods. She simply wanted to help horses. Now the leading experts in her field were here to observe. We read your research papers with great interest, said Dr. Claudia Fernandez, the foundation's president. Your success rates are unprecedented. Thank you, Eleanor replied modestly. But the real success stories are the horses themselves. As the demonstration time approached, Eleanor was surprised to see the stands filling with spectators. Word had spread that something special would be shown today. Among the crowd sat Victor Lancaster and the Montgomerys, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and lingering skepticism. Eleanor led Midnight Commander to the center of the arena. With quiet commands and subtle gestures, she guided the Frisian through a series of movements designed to showcase his restored mobility and strength. The horse moved with fluid grace, showing no signs of the lameness that had threatened his career. The audience watched in fascinated silence as Eleanor demonstrated the transformation of what had been a rapidly deteriorating champion into a perfectly sound animal. When she finished, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Dr. Fernandez stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed today is nothing short of revolutionary. Miss Thatcher has accomplished what many veterinary specialists deemed impossible. As Eleanor led Midnight Commander from the arena, she found Priscilla Montgomery waiting. I came to apologize, Priscilla said, her usual haughtiness absent. The things I said of the auction, I was wrong about you. Eleanor nodded. Most people see what they expect to see. How did you learn to do all this? Priscilla asked. Your rehabilitation techniques, I mean. Eleanor's expression softened slightly. Necessity. When I was 12, my parents couldn't afford veterinary care for our old mare. I studied everything I could find, developed my own therapies. She lived another 10 years. She paused. Sometimes the best innovations come from having no other choice. As they spoke, an elegant black car pulled up nearby. The driver opened the door, and a distinguished older gentleman emerged, his bearing regal despite his advanced age. Grandfather. Priscilla exclaimed in surprise. I thought you were in Switzerland. I was, replied Maxwell Montgomery, patriarch of the Montgomery fortune, until I heard about Eleanor Thatcher's demonstration today. Eleanor's eyes widened slightly. Maxwell Montgomery was a legend in the equestrian world, though he had withdrawn from public life years ago. Mr. Montgomery, she said quietly, it's an honor. The old man studied her face intently. You look just like your grandmother. She had the same determined expression. You, my grandmother? Eleanor asked, surprised. Catherine was my first love, he said simply. Before family obligations separated us, I've followed your family from a distance all these years. Understanding dawned in Priscilla's eyes. That's why you always insisted we keep the auction house, even when it wasn't profitable. You were watching over her family. Maxwell nodded. Catherine chose love over fortune. Her daughter Margaret, your mother, Eleanor, did the same. They never regretted it. The autumn air carried a crisp chill as Eleanor stood at the edge of her property, watching as construction crews broke ground on the new Thatcher Equine Rehabilitation Center. The modern facility would stand adjacent to her original barn, a testament to how far she had come from those early days of working alone with minimal resources. In the months following the county fair, Eleanor's life had transformed dramatically. The International Equine Rehabilitation Foundation had offered her a substantial grant to expand her facilities and train others in her methods. After careful consideration, she had accepted, on the condition that she would never have to leave Willow Creek Farm and that care would remain affordable for all horse owners, regardless of their financial status. Maxwell Montgomery had become an unexpected ally, using his considerable influence to secure additional funding and support. His revelation about his connection to Eleanor's family had filled in many blanks in her understanding of her own history. Her parents had never explained why they chose to live so simply when they clearly had connections to prominent families. "The foundation is looking solid," remarked James Harrington, who had joined her as a consultant on the project. "By spring, you'll be able to help 3 times as many horses." Eleanor nodded, watching as Midnight Commander grazed peacefully in the nearby pasture, completely recovered and now serving as the cornerstone of her small but growing breeding program. "I never wanted any of this attention," she admitted. "I just wanted to help horses that others had given up on." "The best revolutions often start that way," James replied. "One person simply doing what needs to be done, regardless of recognition." The sound of an approaching vehicle drew their attention. Victor Lancaster's Range Rover pulled up, and he stepped out looking uncharacteristically humble. "Miss Thatcher," he said with a nod, "I wanted to see the progress personally." After the fair, Victor had made a surprising pivot. Initially embarrassed by being publicly proven wrong about Eleanor, he had eventually approached her with a business proposition. His family owned vast tracts of land throughout the county, much of it suitable for equestrian purposes but sitting unused. Now they were discussing a partnership to create a sanctuary for retired racehorses. "The architects delivered the final plans to the sanctuary yesterday," Eleanor told him. "I think you'll be pleased with the design." Victor surveyed the construction site. "If someone had told me 6 months ago that I'd be partnering with the farmer girl on a multi-million-dollar equestrian project, I'd have laughed in their face." He shook his head. "I've never been happier to be wrong." As they discussed the details of their joint venture, Priscilla arrived with her grandfather. The young woman had undergone perhaps the most surprising transformation of all. Humbled by the revelation of Eleanor's true expertise and her own family's connection to the Thatchers, she had asked to apprentice with Eleanor to learn her rehabilitation techniques. "Eleanor," Maxwell called out, "Lady Winthrop called from London. The Royal Stables are sending 2 more horses for your program next month." Eleanor smiled, still adjusting to her new reality. 6 months ago, she had been the simple farmer girl in worn jeans who had caused a sensation at the elite horse auction. Now she stood at the center of a revolution in equine care, respected by the very people who had once mocked her. That evening, after everyone had left, Eleanor sat on the porch of her farmhouse, the same modest home she had grown up in and refused to replace despite her changing circumstances. Midnight Commander approached the fence, nickering softly in recognition. "We showed them, didn't we?" she murmured to the horse. Her phone rang, Dr. Fernandez from the foundation with news about an emergency case coming in tomorrow. Eleanor listened carefully, already mentally preparing for the new challenge. This was who she had always been, beneath the simple clothes and unassuming manner, a healer, an innovator, someone who saw value where others saw only limitations. The auction had merely pulled back the curtain on a truth that had always existed. Eleanor Thatcher had never been just a farmer girl in a simple dress. She had been, all along, exactly who she needed to be, herself. As twilight settled over Willow Creek Farm, Eleanor reflected on her journey. She hadn't changed who she was. The world had simply, finally, recognized her true worth. And in that recognition lay the most powerful lesson of all, that real value isn't in appearance or status, but in the quiet determination to make a difference, one horse, one day at a time.